Hey everybody, this is Chris with Overclockersclub. You can see it is Cooler Master Week. I started out with a couple of air coolers. You can check out those reviews. Then I moved on to a couple of fans, and now it's time to look at the liquid coolers. So I'll be looking at all three of these in separate reviews, but we're going to start today with the Master Liquid ML280 Mirror. First thing I have to do is get this thing out of the plastic. Plastic does a great job of protecting the box, but it's so reflective you can't hardly see what's going on with the box. Okay, so this is, again, the Master Liquid ML280 Mirror. You can see it's got two 140 millimeter fans. It's got this cool infinite, I guess, infinite depth sort of RGB effect there. We'll have to get this thing powered up so we can see exactly what that means. So along the bottom here you have your basic dimensions, and we'll take a little closer look. And for the most part these things are all made such that they fit in pretty much any case, but every once in a while you run into a situation where a millimeter or two makes a difference, so that's why it's good to have the dimensions available. And on the back of the box there are various languages, but I'll focus on English because that's the only one I know. So it looks like it's got a third generation pump, increased surface area, so I'll count the number of, usually that means they've added some rows into the radiator, but I'll take a look at that. Resilient material, so EPDM is pretty standard on your coolant tubes. Infinite mirror pump design, so it's got that mirror effect, so it'll be interesting to see what that looks like up close. And looking at the side of the box, there's a better graphic that sort of shows the dual pump, or a dual chamber design I should say. It is a single pump, not a dual pump. New SickleFlow 120 fan. So we'll take a look at those, and the enlarged surface area. So this must be what they mean. They've actually increased the thickness there. So it looks like they're going to the maximum amount of the width of the radiator there, or I should say the thickness of the radiator. And looking at the other side of the box here, this has all the basic specifications. You can see socket coverage over here is all of your latest Intel and AMD sockets. Of course, this is not for the Threadripper series. You have your overall dimensions. So the speed, interesting part that I look at is the fan speed. So 650 to 1400 RPMs. Let's see. What else? 4-pin PWM fans. And then the pump down here looks like it uses 2.36 watts. It'll be interesting to see on these other coolers over here if we're using the exact same pump or not. So I'll have to take a look at that a little more closely too. Okay, so that's all of the information on the side of the box. And back to the front of the box real quick. The fans themselves are not RGB fans on this particular cooler. The only RGB activity is here on the pump. So it just shows here that we're compatible with all of these motherboard synchronization software packages. So now we'll get the box opened up. Alright, so two of the 140 millimeter fans. These are 4-pin fans, if you can see there. And looking at the back, oh, it even has a date, so June 30th of 2020 is when this particular one was made. It has the rubber damper pads here at the corners, which is a good technique for isolating any fan vibration or noise. So we got two of those fans. Warranty information. And the warranty on this one is, it's actually on the other side. Let me look for you real quick, because I was surprised. I figured all of these coolers would be the same, but they're actually not. This one here, the warranty is 2 years, And when I look at these others, okay, this one's 2 years, but this one here, the Master Liquid 360 Illusion, ML360 Illusion, is actually 3 years. Not that that's anything that would be a deal maker or deal breaker, but just to show you there's a little bit of a difference. So this is the goodie bag that has all of the mounting hardware. I'll sort of open this up and go through it. Got a couple bags of desiccant to absorb any moisture. And of course the pump. It has a nice machined copper base. Now keep this little protective sticker. You want to keep this on until the very last minute when you're ready to actually install this to the motherboard, because you don't want this to get scratched up, which is easy to do. But of course you want to make sure that you take this off when it's time and you don't forget and accidentally leave it on there, because that does happen and you will get some horrible thermal performance. And you might be wondering why. Well, the little protective sticker was accidentally left on there. It does happen. Alright, so carefully get this out. Now you want to be real careful with radiators because these fins are very easily bent. They're also pretty easy to straighten. But when you get a brand new radiator, you don't want to bang it all up. Alright, so this has a very nice, there's like a textured finish to it. And it's all black, but I like that. It's a matte black, it's not shiny. But nice effect. Now let's look at our leads here for the pump. There is of course one 3-pin connector for the pump, for pump power. And then coming out of the pump, this is your connector for your RGB effects. It has the typical 3-pin. It's a 4-pin plug. And it only uses 3 of them, and that's pretty common. Now the mirror effect says remove label after install, so we'll leave that on. And really you can't see much other than a shiny surface right now, so I'm sure when it's powered up it will have the intended effect. So again, looking at the radiator itself, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 tubes, and it does go the full thickness of the radiator here. I'll get some measurements on that here also in a moment. Over here, if you notice on the end, there's a little sticker. It says warranty void when removed. This is the fill port. This is where they put the coolant in and then seal it off, and normally you don't have any reason to ever open that, so if you do, you'll destroy the little sticker and you'll damage or void your warranty, I should say. Can't really damage a warranty, I guess. Now the coolant lines here, these are nice braided protective covering. And then the pump itself, these lines pivot. They swivel there so that when your pump is mounted you can move your lines, because your radiator will need to have a little bit of forgiveness and flex in the lines when you're installing it, depending upon whether it's in the front of your system like that or vertical, actually, like that. But certainly you know what the difference is between vertical and horizontal. Alright, so really the next step now is I'll get this bag opened up and sort of walk through some of the fasteners. Actually, before I go through the bag of hardware there, I'm going to go ahead and measure this. And my calipers here, my little digital calipers, when I squeeze them together, they can't quite come together because they're being stopped by the thickness of this frame. This is thicker than the radiator, so I can't use these. But actually, I can. So what I can do is I have these little aluminum spacers here, and I know how thick these are. But actually I don't care how thick these are, because all I have to do is take my calipers and put these both in there and then zero it out. Now when I measure the thickness here, I hold one of these spacers on each side. Hopefully I don't drop them. And then when I measure this overall distance, I've already zeroed it with my spacers, and I'm getting about 20.2 millimeters on the overall thickness. So that's a quick, easy way to sort of indirectly get your measurement. Now we'll go over the hardware here very quickly. So in the manual, it has like a bill of material here. So it has each item pictured, and it tells you how many you should have. So it's a good idea to sort of do a check to make sure you're not missing any hardware. Sometimes there'll be an extra piece here and there, but you just want to make sure you're not missing anything. So first of all, this is your fan splitter, so it allows you to plug 2 fans into one header on your motherboard. You may or may not use that. Just depends if you have enough spare headers. This is the little RGB controller. It's like a little clicker. And then this is the power cable that hooks up to your SATA power on your power supply. This end goes into the clicker, and then the other end here is what goes over to the input on your cooler to control your RGB. And you use this if you're not going to be plugging it into your motherboard to synchronize it. If you don't want to do that, or you have a motherboard that doesn't support that, you'll be using this. Alright, so there's some thermal paste. Oh, I see, so it has a nice sticker there, so it tells you right there, LGA 2011 for that Intel socket is what these little hardware spacers are for. Then we have some screws here for attaching the fans to the radiator, a couple more brackets here. So you're covered for AMD or Intel. Here's the base plate. It already has some little studs in there. There's some double-sided tape that usually goes up against the motherboard to sort of hold your bracket in place. And some more fasteners. And again, they're all covered here in your manual. And then the manual goes through step by step, shows you what to do based on what socket you're using. Shows you how to put the brackets on the pump, how to get the base plate on the motherboard. And again, this is by whatever socket you're using, but it's nice. And then the items that you are actually working with are usually colored there so that you can see which ones they're talking about. Okay, so really the next step is to get the cooler installed to the motherboard. So let's move on to that. Alright, so I'm in the process of putting the brackets on. I already have one bracket on there. You can see it goes on there from that side of the pump. So the screws actually go in when you flip the pump over. And the little bracket there, you can see it's bent. It's got 2 little ears there that sort of bend down. So you want the little bend part to face down, so they go on there like that. So I'll get this one on there, and then we'll be ready to finish the installation. And again, this is the base bracket that actually goes underneath the socket. So I'll peel these little double-sided tape stickers off there, and then this goes a little tricky. I'll just show you real quick how it fits, but it goes underneath the motherboard tray here, or the motherboard itself, and then it pops up through the motherboard. You can see the little studs poking up there, but they fit through those holes. And then when I install the rest of the little spacers, that's what keeps the bracket from falling back through. And there's one more thing I'll say about this bracket. Some of these brackets are symmetrical, so it really doesn't matter if it goes on like this or like that. It's the same. But this one, you'll notice, has this sort of a T shape to it. And there's a reason for that, and it's important that this is oriented properly. So if we look at the socket itself, you can see there are 2 screws at the top and 1 screw down here at the bottom. And of course this goes on the back of the motherboard, but I'm just showing you these cutouts here. You see that one little notch at the bottom, and then the way the T is at the top here, that's to allow space for these 2 screws when this is installed underneath the motherboard here, which I will do in just a moment. So that's why the orientation has to be like this, not like that. So it has to have the bottom of the T pointing like that. And after you get the first 2 started, so I got 2 opposite corners started, then the last ones here should be pretty easy. Once you get that first thread, then the rest, yep. And then the last one here goes in that corner. And then I always snug them up, make sure they're bottomed out. This one here still needs a few more turns. And then I'll get that thermal paste from the last installation cleaned off of there and a fresh application of thermal paste. And I got the little sticker here removed from the base of the pump. You can see that nice surface there. Sort of looks like it's it doesn't have the usual machining marks that you see in a circular pattern. It's more of a, almost looks like it's been sanded. If this thing will stay focused, there we go. So anyway, I've got the thermal paste on there. Actually almost looks like the Monster Energy drink logo, but time to get the pump on there. So I think the way this will fit best is I will put the pump on there with the inlet and the outlet on the ram side. So let's see, and then I have these little fasteners that actually screw everything down. So we put this on there and in this socket, and I'll show you here in just a moment. I'll get one of these started. Actually, I'll get two on the opposite corners so that my pump doesn't want to lift off of there. But again, it depends on which socket you are installing this on. Get the camera over there. But if you look, you can see the three possible locations that stud could pop up through, and it's really based on, again, which socket. So for the 1151, it's right there in the center, and that's how it looks. And now I'll get all the fasteners sort of snugged up a little. Actually, they bottom out, and you want to kind of go in a crisscross pattern here, so you don't tighten one all the way down. You just sort of a few turns on one, and then you go to the next one, and then a few turns on that one until you get them all snugged up. And if you use a screwdriver, I always try to use two hands to sort of guide the screwdriver on there, because you don't want it to slip and plow into your motherboard. So now that these are all snugged down, I can get the power connections and the fans on there, and then we can power it up. Of course, I have to get that sticker off the top there for the RGB effects to really show through. And one thing I'll say here real quick, you always want to make sure your pump is lower than the inlet and outlet on your radiator. And there are a few people out there who have some very extensive and detailed videos talking about, the little bit of air for expansion that's at the top, and you've got to be careful that you don't get that sucked into the pump. And I can say in all the years that I've been testing and working with and using liquid coolers, I've never really had a problem with air getting sucked into the pump and causing any issues, other than maybe I've had a couple coolers that when you'd start them up, you'd hear a little gurgle, but after startup they were fine. So I'm not saying it's not possible, but I just don't know if it's really that big of an issue. So I was sort of on that kick, and I would talk about it, but I don't know if I'm going to really spend any time on it, so I'll just keep moving. All right, fan time. All right, so these are 140 millimeter fans. We've got 4 rubber isolators at each corner, so there are 8 total across the 2 faces. 7-bladed fan. They are semi-transparent, although it's hard to tell there, but I can sort of see through the blades. There are, again, 7 blades. There are a couple of arrows somewhere around here on the side. Here they are. They show fan direction, which way the blade rotates, or the hub rotates, and then there's an arrow that shows the airflow direction, so you know which way it will go. Now the RPM range is 650 to 1400, and the length of the lead here is just a tad over 300 millimeters. Now I'll get this fan attached. I'll also be using the splitter here, since the radiator's off to the side. These kind of don't reach, so I'll use the splitter. Normally you should have no problem in a case getting your fan leads to reach your motherboard, but it's nice to have the splitter if you want to use it. Alright, so these are all snugged up, and I'll get the splitter connected. And it really doesn't matter which fan is connected to which socket here, because they should both run at the same speed, based on the signal from your motherboard. And after that is plugged in, we should be ready to power it up. And the power is on, the fans are running. I plugged in the main pump lead here, and this particular motherboard has a dedicated all-in-one pump header. And then I also plugged in this lead right here, which goes to the RGB header. And we have some nice colors there. Actually, I need to pull this off here so you can see it. There we go. If I can get out of the reflection of the light. And now the next thing I'll do is get the fan tuning done, because you really need the system to understand the RPM versus power curve for the fans, and it's a little different for every fan. So for your system to run most efficiently, or at least to have the best fan control, you need to run your tuning software, and in this case it's the Fan Expert 4. And we'll do the fan tuning, and usually the fans, yep, they shoot up to the maximum, and then at some point they actually stop, and the system tests the amount of current to get the fan starting again and map the fan curve. One thing I noticed is when I first plugged the pump in, it didn't do anything. At least I didn't hear anything. And I thought, uh-oh, maybe I don't have power at the plug here, or at the header, or there's something wrong with the pump. So I did it 2 or 3 times, and I just couldn't hear it, and I don't feel any vibration at all. Just nothing. So I got my head right down to the pump, put my ear right on the pump, and when I unplugged it and plugged it in, then I could hear the pump motor spooling up to speed. I did that 2 or 3 times and confirmed it. It is running. It's just so quiet. You know, usually you get your ear down there and you can hear the motor and you can feel some sort of vibration, and there is just absolutely nothing. So to confirm that the pump is indeed running, you can see it's connected to that AIO, or all-in-one, if I can zoom in there, all-in-one pump header is what I am connected to. And when I look at the fan curve here, of course I haven't adjusted any of the curves, so everything's running at 100% regardless of temperature, which is fine. And then when I come over here and look at the all-in-one pump, it does show that it's running a little over 2300 RPM. So that's really amazing that there's absolutely no sound or vibration. Now I did just go in there and adjust the curve so that at 52C the pump will be running at 100%, and right now it is sitting at 23C, 34%, and the RPMs dropped from 2300 down to just under 1000. So now as things get hotter, the pump will increase its speed. But again, I'm still pretty amazed at how quiet and vibration free that pump is. All right, so now we'll get the stress testing started and see how everything looks. All right, so I'm doing the thermal testing now. Actually, I'm just getting everything up to temperature, doing the thermal soak. It's kind of like when you start your car up on a cold morning and you won't get any heat really until the engine reaches operating temperature. And that's sort of what I'm doing here. You have to let the coolant in the radiator, the mass of the radiator, the coolant in the lines, the coolant in the pump itself, all achieve their maximum temperature. And then we'll look at the actual level of cooling. So I have everything cranked up right now at 4.9 gigahertz. I'll post the system specs here so you can see those. So the fans are maxed out at 1400 RPM, and then I crank the pump up to its maximum. And then we run this. And every system takes a different amount of time to get to its thermal maximum. It really depends on your ambient air temperature. Right now it's 68 degrees Fahrenheit or about 20 degrees Celsius in the room. All right, we've been running for a while now, and it's pretty much bouncing between 69 and 71, so we'll average that out to about 70. And next I will get the thermal camera out, and we'll just take a look at what the thermal imaging looks like. All right, it's thermal camera time. So looking at the intake side, of course you can see the warm spots right there where the fan motors are, and a little bit of heat's creeping through behind the fan. You can see some of that. And then when we come around to the exit side, now is where you see where the heat really is. And you can clearly see on the right is where the hot coolant is coming in, and it travels down the radiator where it makes a quick turn, and then it comes back up. You can see right there it comes back up the other side of the radiator where it should be cooler. So let's see what the temperature is on the side coming in. This is showing around 32 degrees Celsius, and then on the exit side it is a couple degrees cooler. Now that's just the external temperature, not necessarily the actual temperature of the coolant, but you can clearly see where the heat is. And there's the motherboard. Of course, the VRM down there is going to be the hottest part of everything, and clearly it is pretty warm. But back to the radiator again, you can see. And at the top there, right between those two lines, the inlet and outlet, there's actually a little baffle that directs the warm coolant down one half of the radiator. So even though this is a 280 millimeter radiator, your coolant path is actually twice that, because it goes down one side and comes up the other. And that's what it looks like. A couple of things here about the pump and the radiator. So this is their third generation dual chamber pump. So they've redesigned the housing and the impeller. We've got two chambers there, and that's not new by itself, but apparently they've redesigned them. So here's a little animation that sort of shows you what's going on. So it looks like your coolant, your fresh coolant I should say, is coming in the bottom, and when it heats up it's expelled out of the top. So they've made some improvements there to make the efficiency a little higher there. Okay, the radiator itself, as we looked at early on, it's thicker. So they've increased it by, it looks like, 25%. Of course, more surface area translates to more opportunity to reject heat as the fans push air across them. So those are the main things there on the technical side. So like I was saying in the thermal camera video there, your tank is really split here. There's a baffle. I say halfway, but it's really not quite half. It's usually a 60-40 split. And your coolant comes in, goes down one side, and then does a U-turn at the bottom, and then comes back up the other side. But that's pretty much the way all your radiators function. And now I'll try to take a look here at the RGB effect on the pump. I need to block out some of the overhead lights so I don't get all the reflection. There we go. So it has an interesting effect there with the mirror. Sort of goes off into, well, sort of infinity, but that's a nice effect. So let me cycle through some of the colors here. Alright, so I got the camera back on the tripod. Let me see if I can block out some of that overhead light so you see it a little better. There we go. Alright, so that's static. And when it's static, that means I can go into my software and pick whatever color I want, and it will go to that color and stay there. Or I can go to any of these other effects. So there's the breathing effect. It sort of shifts between the colors there. And then there's strobing. And again, this is all being controlled through the motherboard. And then there's color cycle, which it just sort of shifts through all the different colors. And the standard rainbow. And then there is the starry night. And all of that RGB stuff I was controlling through the motherboard, but again, this does come with a way to manually control it. So this is the connector. Again, this end goes to your SATA power off your power supply. This end here plugs into your little controller and it clicks. So let's see, this end here, this special connector snaps in there like that. This is the end that plugs in to the lead coming off of the pump. And then this little plastic cover here, what this does is to keep your two cables connected. So whatever you plug into this end, if you snap it in there like that, when they're both plugged in, this keeps them from becoming disconnected, because this connection right here is there's nothing really locking it together. So you really need to use this little piece right here and you'll be good. Well, I have to say overall, I'm impressed with the cooler. Probably the thing that stood out the most to me is how quiet it is. And you know, I actually left the fan still cranked up at 1400 RPMs, even though I killed the overclock quite a while ago. So everything's nice and cool. But again, the sound level here is very nice. And when you get this thing in a case, it's going to be even quieter than what I'm seeing here right now. So pricing, right now this is really an Amazon exclusive cooler. You can't really get it anywhere else. So it is $134.99, so call it $135. Decent price, I think, for this cooler. Performance wise, I mean, it was able to kill the heat on my 9900K and keep it at a comfortable level. Again, the sound of the fans is very acceptable. There's no sound on the pump, so that is even better. So I would give this the Overclockers Club Gold Award. Stay tuned, because we'll be looking at a couple other coolers here real soon from Cooler Master in the next reviews. So this is Chris with Overclockers Club. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.